Monolid eyes. If you have a monolid, you already know what people say. Your eyes look tired. Have you tried double eyelid tape? Your eyes weren't built for their approval. They were built for something far harder. Scientifically, the monolid is called the epicanthic fold, a layer of skin that covers the inner corner of the eye, and in many cases, the entire upper lid. It's most common in populations from East Asia, Central Asia, and the Arctic. Those regions share one brutal reality: temperatures that freeze moisture in the air, wind that carries ice crystals and sand, snow that bounces sunlight directly into your face with nowhere to escape. That extra fold of skin does three things simultaneously. It holds moisture against the eye surface in conditions that would dry it out. It physically blocks particles from reaching the cornea, and it narrows the eye opening just enough to cut the glare. The same reason you squint in bright light, except your ancestors had it built in permanently. The trade-off is real. Marginally less light enters in very dark conditions, but when you're hunting across snow at noon, darkness was never the threat. One more thing before we continue. There's an eye shape coming up later that researchers spent decades misunderstanding. They thought they knew what it was for. They were wrong. We'll get to it. Hooded eyes. Nobody asks why hooded eyes exist. Every article, every video, every tutorial jumps straight to how to make them look different. So let's be the first. Medically, significant skin folding over the upper lid is called dermatocalcisis. In medical contexts, it's treated as a structural issue. In evolutionary context, it's a feature, and a well-tested one. The tissue that drops over the lid creates a physical overhang above the eye. In conditions where dust storms roll in without warning, where altitude means thinner air and more UV exposure, where wind is a daily problem and not a weather event, that overhang acts as a first barrier. It keeps debris off the eye surface. It throws shadow across the lid. It reduces how much the eye has to work against direct environmental exposure. Populations with high rates of hooded eyes trace back to regions where those conditions were standard: the Tibetan Plateau, Central Asian grasslands, parts of the Middle East and North Africa. The same principle, different geography. The body kept finding the same answer. Almond eyes. Almond eyes sit at a specific proportion, slightly more height than a narrow eye, slightly less than a round one, with a subtle taper toward both corners. Medically, this reflects a balanced orbital aperture, meaning the eye socket opening neither overexposes nor underexposes the eyeball to its environment. That balance sounds unremarkable. It's actually the reason almond eyes appear in almost every population on Earth. An eye shape that works in full desert sun works in temperate European forests. One that handles UV in South Asia handles cold wind in East Africa. The almond shape never maxed out one protective function at the cost of another. And because of that, it spread everywhere conditions were mixed or unpredictable. Your ancestors weren't optimized for one extreme. They were built to handle whatever the climate threw at them next. In a world that changed constantly, that was the real advantage. Round eyes. Round eyes get described as cute, doe-eyed, wide open. All of that is a side effect. The actual function is stranger and more impressive. Medically, round eyes have a wider orbital aperture than almond eyes. More of the eyeball is exposed at rest, more iris visible, more white sclera showing on all sides. Now consider this. Humans have dramatically more visible white sclera than any other primate on Earth. Chimpanzees, gorillas, bonobos. Their eyes are mostly dark. Ours are white around the edges. That difference is not cosmetic. It evolved because we needed other people to see exactly where we were looking. Pointing with your eyes is a uniquely human behavior. It requires the other person to read your gaze direction. And that only works if your eye has visible contrast around the iris. Round eyes, with their wider aperture and more exposed sclera, broadcast emotional state louder and gaze direction more precisely than narrower shapes. In groups where cooperation, trust, and reading other people's intentions decided who survived, that broadcast was critical. Being easy to read wasn't a weakness. It was the foundation of how humans built groups large enough to outlast anything. The downside? More exposed surface means more vulnerability to UV and environmental drying. That's why round eyes are rarer in populations from open, high-glare environments. The social benefit didn't outweigh the physical cost there. upturned and downturned eyes. You've made a judgment about someone's face in under a second and had no idea you were doing it. The angle of the outer eye corner, medically called the palpebral slant, is one of the main inputs your brain uses to run that judgment. When the outer corner sits higher than the inner, the eye reads as alert, youthful, positively charged. The face, even at rest, signals openness. Strangers approach faster. Trust forms earlier. When the outer corner sits lower, the eye reads as calm, weighted, serious. The face at rest signals something more internal. People assume deliberation before you demonstrate it. These aren't cultural preferences that vary across countries. Across populations that had no contact with each other, the same associations appear. The brain is running the same program because the program developed before those populations separated. Early humans who misread a stranger's emotional state, who approached when they should have waited, or held back when they should have engaged, paid for that mistake in real ways. The brain that got faster at reading palpebral slant survived more encounters, reproduced more, passed on that fast-reading brain. Your eye corner angle has been sending signals your entire life. You just didn't know the name of what it was saying. Deep-set eyes. For decades, researchers focused on the brow ridge above deep-set eyes and concluded it was primarily structural, a byproduct of jaw mechanics and skull development during chewing. Then biomechanical modeling got more precise, and the secondary function became undeniable. That ridge is a shield. Deep-set eyes, medically described as having a deep orbital socket, or in injury-related cases called enophthalmos, sit further back in the skull than other eye shapes. The brow ridge protrudes forward above them. The bone around the socket is denser and more pronounced. In a world where there was no protective eyewear, no goggles, no sunglasses, that bone structure was the only barrier between the environment and one of the most irreplaceable organs in the body. It deflects blunt impacts. It reduces wind hitting the eye surface directly. It throws the eye into permanent partial shade, cutting UV exposure and glare without any conscious effort. If you have deep-set eyes, your skull is doing the same job a pair of sunglasses and safety glasses do, simultaneously, every moment of every day. That's not a face shape. That's infrastructure. Wide-set and close-set eyes. The gap between your eyes has nothing to do with your eyes. It's determined by nasal bridge width, the spacing of the orbital bones, and the broader geometry of your skull. Medically, extreme cases of wide spacing are called hypertelorism, and extreme narrow spacing hypotelorism. But most people simply land somewhere on a natural spectrum shaped entirely by inherited bone structure. What's interesting is what that spacing communicates and how automatically the brain processes it. Close-set eyes push the face inward. The visual effect reads as focused, zeroed in, intense. Studies on face perception show that people rate close-set faces as more analytical and more likely to be looking directly at something. In social dynamics, it signals concentration, precision, attention that doesn't wander. Wide-set eyes open the face outward. The same face perception research shows wide-set eyes correlate with perceived warmth, approachability, and calm. The face appears less confrontational at a baseline level. In group environments where being seen as safe determined who got included and who got excluded, that mattered enormously. Neither is a more accurate signal. Both get sent constantly, received constantly, and acted on constantly by people who have no awareness they're doing any of it. Ancient software, no off switch. The shape you have is the one that worked. Every eye shape in this video passed the same test. Not a beauty standard, not a cultural preference, not a trend. The test was simpler and more brutal than any of those. Stay alive long enough to have children. The epicanthic fold passed that test across Arctic winters where moisture loss from the eye meant the difference between seeing and not seeing. The hooded lid passed it across environments where a single dust storm could end a hunt or end someone's useful life entirely. The deep orbital socket passed it in physical worlds where an unprotected eye was an injury waiting to happen. Round eyes passed it in the social worlds where reading other people fast enough and being read clearly enough determined who built the alliances that survived. Almond eyes passed it everywhere else. These shapes weren't selected because they looked a certain way. They were selected because they worked, relentlessly, across hundreds of thousands of years, and every climate the planet threw at the people living in it. The beauty industry has had opinions about your eyes for maybe 50 years. Your eye shape has been field tested for 500,000.